Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos.
The main character, after dying in his previous life, he wakes up inside One Piece. He later becomes an admiral and he starts taking bribes. What is he gonna do inside of One Piece?
And said earnestly, "Well done, Sakazuki. It seems you've also grasped the true meaning of justice." Sakazuki slapped Kane's hand away in disgust and snorted, "Shut up. I'm just stating the facts. Hey, don't be so heartless." Kane leaned closer, rubbed his fingers together, and lowered his voice, saying, It seems the boss has already brought over that 50 million. Although I'm going to take the lion's share, since you also contributed in order to support your efforts to repair the future branch, I can reluctantly give you 10%. Sakazuki paused, veins throbbing on his forehead. Get out. 20%. That's the most I can go. I told you to get lost. Chapter 21, Morgan's headline. Dead hostages are good hostages. The following morning, at Naval Headquarters. As the sun rose, the cries of seagulls echoed over the fortress. However, the marshal's office door was tightly shut, and the roars emanating from it made the Marines outside tremble. Snapped. A copy of the World Economic News was slammed onto the solid wood desk, making the teacup on it tremble. The current fleet admiral, Steelbow Kong, had a dark expression on his face. Pointing at the newspaper on the table, he roared at Zephyr standing before him. "Zephyr, look at this. Look for yourself. Is this the elite you've trained?" Zephyr, his face grim, silently puffed on his cigar, his expression obscured by the swirling smoke. On the sofa next to him, Carp was sitting cross-legged, crunching on a senbei rice cracker, while craning his neck to read the newspaper. The front page of the newspaper featured a huge photograph that took up half the page. In the photo, Kane stands righteously in front of the ruins, with three terrifying figures behind him, the three Sakazukis, and a group of hostages who, although rescued, have terrified eyes. The headline is typical of Morgan's style, bold, black, and shocking. Bloodstained Sabyodi. The Devil's Rescue of a Rising Navy Star. Is it the thunder of justice or the butcher's reverie? Exclusive commentary on dead hostages are good hostages. A quote from Warrant Officer Kane, who witnessed to remain anonymous. Ha-ha. Cough, cough, cough. When Garp saw that subheading, he burst out laughing, spraying bits of senbei rice cracker all over Sengoku's face. A dead hostage is a good hostage. Kane, that kid, is a genius. Garp, shut up, and get your damn senbei away from me. As Sengoku wiped the debris from his face, he adjusted his glasses, his brow furrowed. Fleet Admiral Kong, this is a bit troublesome. The world government has received numerous complaints from nobles of member states, saying that our navy openly massacred civilians in Sabyodi Archipelago, which has terrified many nobles, and some nobles have even begun to boycott our navy. Massacre civilians, Marshal Kong snorted coldly, about to lash out. Just then, the office door was pushed open. Kane led in three other accomplices. He looked righteous, with clear eyes, and held a letter of self-criticism in his hand. Reporting to the Marshal. I believe the newspapers are spreading rumors. Kane stood at attention and saluted, his voice booming. Faced with vicious pirates who attempted to blow up the building, we only took the necessary measures. As for the pirates, slightly gruesome deaths, that's purely because they had osteoporosis and lacked any sense of martial ethics, ramming their faces into our fists. Marshal Kong's eyes twitched violently. He rammed his face into a fist. That springy guy got smashed into the ground. Are you trying to tell me he was trying to escape through a hole? Reporting to the Marshal, this possibility cannot be ruled out, Kane said without changing his expression. Enough. Marshal Kong rubbed his throbbing temples. Sakazuki, who had been silent all along, suddenly took a step forward, and the heat emanating from his body caused the office temperature to rise sharply. Marshal, if you're here to hold someone accountable, I'll take full responsibility. That kind of scum, even if he did it again, I'd still kill him without hesitation. Kane is right. Only dead pirates are immune to repeating their mistakes. So-called mercy is the greatest desecration of justice. Sengoku and Vice Admiral Tsuru exchanged a glance, a hint of shock flashing in their eyes. Sakazuki used to be radical, but he still followed the rules. Now, why does he seem to have become like Kane? Who said there would be accountability? Vice Admiral Tsuru, who had been quietly sipping his tea, suddenly spoke. The naval chief of staff put down his teacup, his gaze sweeping over the four men with a deep intensity, finally settling on Kane. Although the methods were excessive, the deterrent effect was very good. Intelligence shows that the lawless areas of Chainboard were much quieter this morning, and even the number of human traffickers was reduced by half. Crane stood up, walked to the world map, and gently tapped the location of the North Sea with her finger. However, given your current strength and destructive power, it's really not appropriate for the four of you to continue playing house with the new recruits in the elite camp. Tsuru turned around, revealing a meaningful smile. Perfect timing, there's some trouble in the North Blue. The Germa 66 Kingdom has recently been relying on its technological strength to instigate wars everywhere, and even openly plundering non-member states. As a member state of the world government, the Marine headquarters can't directly intervene. But Tsuru's eyes sharpened. What if a few lost naval trainees accidentally got caught up in Germa's battlefield during their leave and some conflict ensued? Marshal Kong understood immediately and wrote with a flourish. That's right. Since you all have so much energy, then go to Beihai for a vacation. Mission objective: make Germa 66 behave. Once the mission is completed, you can officially graduate and be awarded ranks. Going to Beihai. Germa 66. Kane's eyes lit up instantly. That's the Vinsmoke family. That's a walking encyclopedia of cutting-edge technology. A warmonger with wealth beyond measure. Moreover, I've heard that old man Vinsmoke Judge hoarded countless gold, silver, and rare materials in order to dominate the North Sea. Guaranteed to complete the mission. Kane snapped to attention and saluted, declaring righteously, I utterly abhor the Germa's actions that disrupt peace. I will certainly use love and justice to reform them. 3 hours later. Marineford Port. A medium-sized warship without any serial number is ready to set sail. Kane stood on the deck, holding the transfer order in his hand. As he looked at the words, go to the North Sea to deal with the Germa 66 terminal, the smile on his lips gradually turned sinister. Hey Tilda Beihai. I heard the mafia there is really fierce Tilda. Borsellino lay on a sun lounger, sunglasses covering his face, a glass of orange juice in his hand, looking like he was enjoying himself since he couldn't fight back. It would be great if I could bring back some local specialties. While I'm at it, Tilda. The sins of Germa should be settled. Sakazuki stood at the bow of the ship, gazing into the distance, lava flowing between his fingertips. His mind was now filled with Kane's indoctrination to eradicate the root of the problem. Cusin was snoring beside him, already asleep with an eye mask on. Men, set sail. Kane stood in the captain's seat, one foot on the railing, and waved his hand with great confidence. Looking at these three future top combatants, he felt a surge of pride. Meanwhile, the North Sea is thousands of miles away. Vinsmoke Judge, who was sitting on the throne of the moving castle, suddenly felt a chill run down his spine and sneezed violently. What's going on? This ominous feeling. Chapter 22, giving Germa a little Logia-type shock. North Sea, waters near Flevans. Under the grey sky, the waves appeared a sombre, leaden black. Boom, boom, boom. The continuous sound of artillery, fire tore through the sea breeze. Looking out, the once empty sea surface was now crowded with giant snails. Hundreds of giant den mushy warships, each carrying a castle and turret, stood end to end, creating a mobile homeland on the sea. A huge 66 symbol fluttered in the wind on its flag. The Kingdom of Germa, the war fortress of House Vinsmoke. They are carrying out a one-sided massacre. The besieged island nation was utterly powerless to resist the clone soldiers clad in high-tech combat suits, who knew neither pain nor fear. Meanwhile, in the command center of the Germa flagship. Is this the lament of the weak? How pleasing to the ear. Page 24. Vinsmoke Judge, spear in hand and draped in a golden cloak, stood before a massive floor-to-ceiling window. Through the gaps in his mask, he coldly gazed at the burning town below. Commander-in-Chief, a clone commander in a black uniform, strode over and mechanically reported, a warship is approaching from 3 nautical miles away. A bunch of low-level Navy rabble from the North Sea. Judge frowned slightly, then let out a contemptuous sneer. Probably some reckless branch colonel trying to get a piece of the pie. Ignore them. Judge waved his hand as if shooing away a fly. Fire warning shots. If they don't cooperate, just sink them. Shipwrecks are common in these remote waters, aren't they? Understood, Commander. 3 seas away. A medium-sized warship without any serial number is cutting through the waves. Wow! Is this the legendary Germa 66? On the deck, Kane held up his binoculars, gazing at the densely packed fleet in the distance, his mouth practically watering. In view, the densely packed, snail-shaped boats looked not like warships, but like moving mountains of gold. Those ship hull structures, if they're made of special alloys, could fetch hundreds of millions of berries just from being dismantled and sold as scrap metal. And those combat suits on the clones, if you stripped them off and sold them on the black market. Kane muttered to himself as he even took out a calculator and started pressing buttons. Oh dear. Kane wipes his drool. If you get photographed like this by reporters, the Navy's image will be completely ruined. Cusin scratched his fluffy curly hair and looked at the fleet that blotted out the sky in the distance. The Vinsmoke family. I've heard their technological prowess is so enviable that even the scientists at headquarters are envious. With so many ships, they must have at least tens of thousands of troops, right? There are only 4 of us. Won't that be too much of a stretch? Troops. Sakaski stood at the bow of the ship, his crimson shirt stretched taut by the gale. He pulled his hat brim down, and his right arm, billowing black smoke, betrayed his current mood. Just a bunch of small fry relying on external things. Quantity is meaningless in the face of absolute power. Yea, Tilda Sakazuki is still as scary as ever Tilda, Borsellino said, pouting as he held a cup of hot tea. But they're a member state, you know. If we make the first move, writing reports back home will be a real hassle, Tilda. Make the first move. How could that be? Kane put away the calculator, straightened his tie, and put on his standard smile. We are the Navy, partners of justice. How can we resort to violence so easily? As he spoke, he pulled a specially made megaphone den mushy from his pocket and cleared his throat. Hello. Testing the microphone, testing the microphone. Boom, boom, boom. The sound quality is not bad. Next second. The sound, amplified several times over, instantly resounded across the entire sea area, drowning out the continuous gunfire. On Germa's flagship, Judge suddenly looked up. All the clone soldiers who were firing froze. Even the civilians on the bombed island were stunned. Who the hell is this? Testing the microphone on the battlefield. The sound continued to come. Ahem. Greetings to the Derma 66 illegal armed group ahead. This is the Special Operations Enforcement Team of the Navy Headquarters. I am Warrant Officer Kane, the Commander-in-Chief of this law enforcement operation. Kane didn't give him a chance to react and continued to shout. We have received reports from concerned citizens that you are suspected of a serious illegal assembly. First, your gathering of over 300 warships here constitutes a massive illegal armed assembly. According to the latest regulations of this headquarters, any armed gathering of more than 3 people must submit a written application to Marineford 30 days in advance. Did you apply? No. Secondly, your indiscriminate firing has filled this sea area with smoke, severely damaging the air quality of Beihai and even causing marine noise pollution. Have you considered the feelings of the fish sleeping in the sea? This is utterly morally depraved. Third, and most importantly, we need to check if you are carrying any prohibited items, such as weapons of mass destruction. Now, on behalf of the Navy Headquarters, I am conducting a surprise inspection of you. The entire venue was deathly silent. Not only were the soldiers of Germa dumbfounded, but even the Marines on the warships were stunned. What the hell is this illegal assembly? What the hell is this fish's sleep quality? Sir, are you just trying to rob me outright? Kane's smile deepened. He took a deep breath and dropped the final bombshell. Given the seriousness of your actions, you are hereby ordered to immediately cease all activities. Everyone must disembark and undergo a body search. Furthermore, you are required to pay a fine of 500 million berries. If you don't cooperate. Kane paused, his tone turning chilling. We can only conclude that you have violently resisted law enforcement and will take all necessary coercive measures, including but not limited to stewing you and the snails together into soup. Inside the flagship command center. Click. Judge crushed the wine glass in his hand, spilling red wine all over the floor. 500 million. Why don't you just rob the heavens? The veins on Judge's forehead throbbed, and the absurd feeling of being humiliated by ants made him laugh in anger. You want to stew us into soup? Fine. Very well. A mere warrant officer from headquarters dares to spout nonsense in front of Germa. Who is he? He is a scientist who once worked with Vegapunk. He is the overlord who rules the North Sea. Fire. Judge brandished his spear, his roar echoing throughout the hall. Smash that wrecked ship to smithereens. Capture that bastard. I want to turn him into a specimen and hang him at the very top of the castle. Following the Commander-in-Chief's order, the Germa fleet demonstrated remarkable military prowess. Click, click, click. Hundreds of snail-shaped warships turned their cannons almost simultaneously, their dark barrels densely packed, locking onto the lone warship. Boom, 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 boom. Next moment, the artillery fire poured down like a black rainstorm, the flames illuminating half the sky. That terrifying density of firepower was enough to wipe a small island off the nautical chart in an instant. Ding! Host detected extorting money from member states. Judgment extremely serious. Disciplinary value plus 5,000. Faced with the barrage of gunfire, Kane sighed, pulled a handful of sunflower seeds from his pocket, and took a step back. Oh dear, you're in such a hurry already. As you all see, The other side violently resisted the law and attempted to murder a naval officer. The evidence is conclusive. He turned his head, looked at the three people behind him who were already unable to contain themselves, smiled slightly, and spat out a piece of sunflower seed shell. In that case, Sakazuki, Cusin, Borsellino, it's up to you. Give this overlord of the North, see a little bit of natural shock. Chapter 23. You think you can just leave with 500 million berries? Sorry, you'll have to pay more. HMPH, no need for your nonsense. Sakazuki could no longer contain his destructive desires. They dream of dominating the seas, scurrying about like rats, creating chaos. Sakazuki took a sudden step forward, and the warship deck beneath his feet even instantly carbonized and turned black due to the high temperature. He soared into the air, his right arm rapidly expanding in midair, transforming into surging, dark red magma, instantly turning the originally gloomy sky crimson. On the Germa flagship, Judge suddenly raised his head, his pupils contracting sharply, and saw a scene through the mask that made his soul tremble. A giant lava fist, as large as half a fleet, obscured the view like a meteorite. That's a Logia type. Judge's voice went off-key. In midair, Sakazuki coldly looked down at the ants below, his voice booming. A bunch of weaklings who rely on external resources dare to challenge justice. A massive fireball. Boom! The devastating lava collided with the barrage of artillery shells. There was absolutely no suspense. The projectile vaporized the moment it touched the magma, not even managing to block it for a second. Immediately afterwards, the lava, with its remaining force, slammed into the vanguard of the Germa fleet. Sizzle! The sea was boiling. The first massive snail-shaped warship didn't even have a chance to explode. It was instantly melted by the high temperature. Then came the second, the third. More than a dozen sturdy steel fortresses, which instantly turned into a rolling sea of molten iron and fire. Countless clone soldiers didn't even have time to scream before they returned to dust. Ding! Teammate Sakazuki has caused devastating damage. Judgment, excessive enforcement. A serious violation of naval humanitarian principles. Page 25. The host, as the commander, bears joint responsibility. Disciplinary value plus 2,000. Kane stood at the bow of the warship, listening to the pleasant notification sound in his mind, and contentedly cracked open a sunflower seed. He let the heatwave tousle his hair, gazing at the apocalyptic scene in the distance, and gently shook his head, his tone filled with regret and disappointment. Oh dear. Mr. Judge, is this the confidence you have in dominating the North Sea? It's a little disappointing. Kane raised his hand, pointed at Judge, and activated his taunting mode. If that's your level, then I suggest you go home and play in the mud. The waters of Beihai are too deep. You can't handle them. Damn you. You damned Navy. I'll tear you to pieces. Judge has gone completely mad. Decades of accumulated wealth, a tenth of it, was destroyed in a single encounter. He suddenly pressed the button on his mask, and the high-tech jetpack behind him spewed out blue airflow, suspending him in the air. Germana, take off. You ceased on bullets to kill them all. As long as you spread out, those heavy attacks won't hit you. However, before he could finish speaking, a lazy and irritating voice rang out directly above his head. How clumsy. Are you talking about Sakazuki? That's a terrible compliment, Tilda, but being called an idiot is also a headache for me, Tilda. Judge suddenly looked up. It's blinding. It was even more dazzling than looking directly at the midday sun. Borsellino, hands in his pockets, stood hundreds of meters in the air, defying all the laws of physics, his yellow striped suit gleaming in the light. He pouted, his sunglasses reflecting the clone army below, which was trying to take off and fight like headless flies. Spreading out the formation is indeed troublesome, since we have to aim at each one individually, so. Borsellino crossed his arms in front of his chest, interlocking his index fingers and thumbs, his fingertips shimmering with golden light, like thousands of stars twinkling at the same time. The 8-foot jade curved jewel. Just as the golden light was about to burst forth, another slightly languid voice softly sounded beside him. Since Borsellinossen has gone to such length, I'll add a little something extra. If they swim away, it'll be a real hassle to clean them up. Before anyone knew it, Cusin had appeared in midair. With a shake of his arms, the air around him instantly froze, and hundreds of ice-thorn spears radiating a chilling aura appeared out of thin air. 2-thorn spear. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. For a moment, the sky was divided into two completely different lights. On one side, a rain of golden light projectiles plummeted at breakneck speed, carrying destructive heat. On the other, a stream of pale ice spears, sharp enough to pierce steel and radiating extreme cold. There are no blind spots and no room to dodge. This time, it's Germa's turn to experience what it means to be covered by firepower. Golden explosions and icy freezes erupted simultaneously within the Germa fleet. Before the soldiers pierced by the light bullets could even scream from the intense heat, the ice spears that followed froze them, along with the surrounding air, into blood-red blocks of ice. The clone soldiers who tried to disperse using their jetpacks had nowhere to hide in the gap between the light and ice, and fell into the scalding seawater like dumplings. Ding! Teammates Borsellino and Cusin have been detected, causing widespread damage. Judgment, tendency to torture and kill prisoners. Disciplinary, value, plus 1,500. Damn it. Why would such a monster appear in the North Sea? Judge's hand holding the spear began to tremble violently, and cold sweat instantly soaked through his combat suit. Has the Marine headquarters gone mad? Sending 3 top-tier Logia-type devil fruit users just to deal with one Germa. His legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground. The spear fell to the ground with a clang. In just 3 minutes, his once proud and invincible fleet was reduced to molten iron in half and riddled with holes in half. Run, we have to run. The ambition in Judge's eyes was completely extinguished, leaving only the instinct for survival. He crawled on all fours toward the control panel of the escape pod, located at the rear of the bridge. As long as he can escape back to the core laboratory, as long as the cloning technology remains, he can. Oh dear. Now that you're here, don't rush off. If you guys get away, Kane will start nagging me about not doing any work. A languid voice, accompanied by a bone-chilling cold, enveloped the entire sea area. Cusin crouched on the gunwale of the warship, one hand plunging into the seawater. Ice Age. Click, click, click. A sickening freezing sound rang out. Centered on the warship, the pale ice sheet spread outward at an alarming rate, instantly engulfing the boiling sea surface. The waves remained frozen in their swirling motion, and the enormous snail-shaped warships that tried to turn around were instantly locked onto the thick ice field, unable to even let a fly escape. The whole world has been transformed into a giant ice sculpture graveyard. Ding! Teammate Cusin has been detected freezing a critical shipping lane, obstructing traffic. Judgment, environmental damage. Affecting navigation. Disciplinary, value, plus 1,000. Comfortable. Kane suppressed the urge to smile, looking at the soaring numbers on the system panel, which were enough for him to start the lottery wheel. He patted the sunflower seed crumbs off his hands and straightened his tie. Moonwalk. Bang. He stepped lightly and gracefully landed on the frozen deck of the Germa flagship. The soles of the leather shoes collided with the ice, making a crisp tap, tap sound. The sound was particularly jarring on the desolate ice plains, each stomp on Judge's already crumbling nerves. At this moment, Judge's body was half frozen on the control panel, unable to move, and he could only watch in horror as the young naval warrant officer walked towards him step by step. Behind him, three terrifying monsters stood in a triangle formation, surrounding Judge, whose face was ashen. Kane walked up to Judge, squatted down, and gave him a warm, gentle smile. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Vinsmoke, Judge." Kane gently brushed a piece of ice off Judge's shoulder, his voice tender. "Let me introduce myself. I am Warrant Officer Kane from Naval Headquarters." "What did I just say?" Kane pulled out the little notebook labeled tickets from his pocket, tapped his chin with the pen cap, and looked thoughtful. "Oh, by the way, illegal assembly, environmental pollution, violent resistance to law enforcement, assaulting military officers. These are all serious offenses." Judge's teeth chattered as he looked at the demon before him and forced out a sound through clenched teeth. I'll give 500 million. Let me go. As long as I can survive, what does money matter? Germa's skills are still there. He can make a comeback." Hearing this, Kane did not show any satisfaction. Instead, he frowned and looked at Gadji with surprise, as if he had heard something unbelievable. 500 million. Kane sighed dramatically, slowly stood up, and looked down at the former overlord of the North Sea. That look in his eyes was like looking at a native who didn't know the rules. "Mr. Judge, have you misunderstood something? The 500 million I mentioned earlier was a friendly price before anything was done. Now." Kane glanced at the three monstrous figures behind him with a deep look in his eyes and said softly, "You'll have to pay more. Chapter 20, for 1 billion to buy my life. Thank you, Navy, for not killing me. More money." He actually dared to ask for more money. Vinsmoke Judge stared intently at the smiling young Navy man, feeling his heart pounding. A tremendous sense of humiliation welled up inside me. "Damn it, you're declaring war on the member states of the world government." Judge's voice trembled with rage as he grabbed the den mushy and roared at the outside world. "I want to denounce your atrocities to the world government." However, all that came through the den mushy was a buzzing sound of electricity. "Don't waste your energy." Kane picked at his ear, looking completely innocent. "The signal isn't very good in this area." Page 26. "It was you who did this," Judge realized instantly. "How can you blame me for the bad signal?" Kane spread his hands. "It's probably just that the den mushy caught a cold because of the cold weather." Judge's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He looked at the three monsters outside, then at the fleet that was completely frozen and whose weapon systems were destroyed, and a sense of powerlessness welled up in his heart. Technology. Faced with these unreasonable Logia-type ability users, his proud technological army was as fragile as paper. "What exactly do you want?" Judge asked in a hoarse voice, suppressing his anger. "Look," Kane said, pointing to the ravaged battlefield and then to Sakazuki's still-smoking arm. "My colleague had to use his ultimate move to stop you, which took a lot of energy. Mr. Borsellino's flash is bad for your eyes, and Mr. Cusan's freezing of the sea makes you susceptible to colds." Kane leaned closer to Judge, his smile as radiant as a devil's. In addition to compensation for emotional distress, lost wages, depreciation of the warship, and medical expenses for the psychological trauma caused by your threats against me. He stretched out one hand, spread his 5 fingers, and then flipped it over. The current price is 1 billion berries. Of course, I accept payment in gold. 1 billion. Judge's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. Why don't you just rob someone? Isn't that what I'm doing right now? Kane answered confidently, then sighed, his tone becoming compassionate. Look, I could have killed everyone here, and then dismantled all your junk ships and sold them for scrap metal. But I didn't. Why? Because I'm a peace-loving Navy man. I gave you a chance to atone for your sins with money. You should be thanking me. Think about it. 1 billion berries for the peace of your entire German kingdom. What a steal. Judge's chest heaved violently. He had never suffered such humiliation in his life. This is a fucking steal. And I should thank you guys. He, the mighty king of Germa and the overlord of the North Sea, was actually extorted at the door by a mere brat. This is absolutely outrageous. What if? I disagree. Judge gritted his teeth and squeezed out a few words. Boom! Before the words were even finished, a wave of heat instantly engulfed the entire command center. Sakazuki, who had been relatively calm before, now had half of his body transformed into rolling, dark red magma. Kane, I told you there was no need to waste words on such evil. Sakazuki's voice was deep and hoarse. He raised his massive lava hand, powerful enough to melt everything, and the terrifying heat caused ripples to spread through the surrounding space. Since he doesn't appreciate it, let's wipe this place out completely. A family that wreaks havoc on the sea has no reason to exist. Meteor Volcano. As he moved, the dark clouds in the sky that had not yet dissipated were instantly dyed blood red, and countless huge lava meteorites appeared and disappeared in the clouds. The scene was like the end of the world. Yea, Tilda Sakazuki's really angry Tilda, Borsellino said, sounding horrible, but a blinding golden light flashed from his fingertips. If you don't decide quickly, I won't be able to control this laser beam anymore, Tilda, after all. Slipping up happens all the time, Tilda. Judge looked at the apocalyptic scene above him, then at Sakazuki's eyes, which were devoid of any emotion and filled only with pure killing intent. At this moment, the psychological defenses of this overlord of the North Sea completely collapsed. He realized that these people really dared to kill him. To that magma madman, 1 billion berries is nothing. Only that guy named Kane is the only one who can save Germa's lives. If you disagree, Kane's voice rang out again with a hint of amusement, I will have to watch with tears in my eyes as my companions wipe you sinful beings from this world. At that time, you won't be able to take even a single berry to hell, let alone 1 billion. Judge looked at the devastating shadow overhead, feeling a chill run through his body. He had no doubt that if he said no, the entire Germa kingdom would be engulfed in flames the next second. A long time. I'll give it to you. Judge seemed to have all his strength drained away in an instant and slumped down on the throne in despair. These two words almost consumed all the pride he had ever had. That's more like it. Kane patted Judge's golden shoulder armor with a smile. If we had cooperated earlier, we would still be good friends. It's too much of a hassle to force me to take action. After half an hour, dozens of large crates filled with Baileys were carried out of the flagship's treasury by clone soldiers and carefully placed on the ice. Kane stepped forward, opened one of the boxes, grabbed a handful of golden pellies, and examined them in the sunlight. Not bad quality, he nodded in satisfaction, then looked at Judge. Pleasure doing business with you, King Vinsmoke. I hope I won't see your fleet in places where it shouldn't be again. After saying that, Kane waved his hand behind him and said, Fall in. Go home and have dinner. Sakazuki snorted and withdrew the magma. Cusin yawned, and broke free from his icy state. Borsellino transformed into a golden light and returned to the warship. Watching the naval warship slowly depart, Judge gritted his teeth in frustration. Damn the Navy. Damn Logia type. Just you wait. One day I will tear you to pieces. Judge stared intently at the distant horizon, his eyes burning with a frenzied flame of revenge. Commander-in-Chief, a commander stepped forward at a loss for what to do. Pass on my order. Judge stood up abruptly, his eyes flashing with a crazed light. Invest all resources into the final modification plan for the bloodline factor. I not only want my children to have superhuman physiques, but also the power of demons. I, Vinsmoke Judge, will repay today's humiliation 100-fold. Chapter 25, Code Name, 0 Yuan Purchase. Just raids need no reason. About 10 nautical miles after leaving the German fleet, the warship did not return at full speed, but quietly sailed into a reef area shrouded in thick fog and anchored. Inside the captain's cabin, the curtains were drawn tightly shut, letting in only a few dim rays of light. The once spacious room now felt incredibly crowded. Not because there were many people, but because there was so much money. Crack! Kane opened the last box, and a blinding golden light instantly illuminated the faces of the 4 men. A dozen or so boxes were stacked into a small mountain, filled with glittering pegs, fist-sized rubies, and several heavy gold bars, exuding an intoxicating aroma. 100 million, 200 million, 500 million. Kane squatted beside the pile of money, frantically counting it like a money-counting machine, his dignified naval demeanor completely gone. Borsellino tossed a gold brick in his hand, his eyes behind his sunglasses narrowing into slits with a grin, his sleazy demeanor on full display. Wow, Kane is so capable. So much money, he'll get a pretty good bonus after we hand it in. Bonus. Borsellino, your vision is too narrow. Kane stuffed bundles of banknotes into the system space, ostensibly by putting them into sacks. This is all money that Germa looted from Heiming. It's stolen money. We need to keep it safe and slowly find the rightful owner. Until we find the owner, it will naturally be under our control to enhance our strength and better combat evil. Cusin sprawled on the sofa, rolled his eyes, and pulled down his eye mask. Moving money is so tiring. It feels no different from being a pirate. Kane, if Professor Zeff knew we were doing this, would he break our legs? SHH. Cusin, watch your words. Kane immediately corrected him seriously. Pirates steal money to squander it for their own selfish desires. We confiscate funds for world peace. How can these be the same? Only Sakazuki sat alone in a shadowy corner, his hat brim pulled low, his brows furrowed into a deep frown. Although he acknowledged absolute justice, this blatant extortion still made him somewhat uncomfortable. Kane. Sakazuki spoke in a deep, somewhat hoarse voice. The mission was merely to quell the unrest in Germa. Taking money to release him violates military discipline. Since that guy was a menace, why not just kill him? Taking this money makes me feel disgusted. The room fell silent instantly. Borsellino whistled and looked up at the ceiling, while Cusin pulled his blindfold back slightly to secretly observe the situation. Upon hearing this, Kane stopped putting the money away, slowly turned around, and the greed on his face vanished instantly. Sakazuki, do you think I want this money? Kane pointed indifferently at the treasure on the ground, as if it were a pile of garbage. Killing Judge is easy, but what happens after he dies? Germa's technology remains, and the Vinsmoke family still exists. With this enormous sum of money, new ambitious individuals will soon be able to use it to create even more killing weapons. The foundation of Germa has never been any one person, but rather its immense wealth, the financial chain that sustains their war machine. Kane walked up to Sakazuki and placed his hands on his shoulders. War is a money-burning machine. Without money, Germa can't create clones, repair warships, or buy shells. They can only stay at home and farm. By taking their money, we are actually saving civilians who are about to die under the Germa gunfire. This is called cutting off the fuel supply from under the cauldron. Sakazuki was stunned. He looked into Kane's clear eyes, his mind racing. No money equals, no weapons equals, no war equals peace. I take the money equals the enemy becomes weaker equals justice is served. Therefore, the more money I take, the more thoroughly justice is served. This logic is damnably coherent. Page 27. The gloom in Sakazuki's eyes gradually dissipated, replaced by a sudden realization and admiration, even a hint of shame. He had actually misunderstood Kane's good intentions. I see. Sakazuki took a deep breath, his eyes under the brim of his hat gleaming with determination. Kane, you see further than I do. I was just being superficial. I'm glad you understand. Kane nodded with relief. Ding. A major shift in the sense of justice has been detected in the important character, Sakazuki. Highly disruptive, violation score plus 5,000. But Kane's tone shifted, his expression turning serious again, even carrying a hint of murderous intent. This is far from enough. He straightened up, walked back to the table, and casually slapped the Derma Palace structure diagram that he had taken from Judge onto the table. Did you think our mission this time was simply to extract some money, and then it would be over? The three were stunned. Isn't that right? Cusin scratched his head. Didn't the report say that we just needed to keep Germa in line? That's just a superficial task, Kane exclaimed, looking utterly distraught. You haven't seen the true nature of things yet. He pointed out the window in the direction the Germa fleet had retreated, his voice filled with fervor. I know Vinsmoke, Judge, too well. He may have backed down just now, but he's probably cursing us at home right now, maybe even vowing revenge. He'll never let this go. Moreover, how could Germa, with its more than 300 years of history, only have a mere billion in cash? As soon as we leave Beihai, they will quickly rise again using their remaining enormous wealth, and even exploit the people of Beihai to make up for their losses. So to solve the problem at its root, we must, Kane paused, a glint of light flashing in his eyes, cut off their war funding completely. Make sure they don't even have money to buy a screw. Upon hearing this, Sakazuki abruptly stood up, his body radiating heat. Only by completely destroying their foundations can we prevent the resurgence of evil. Tilde, that sounds pretty reasonable, Tilde. Borsellino pushed up his sunglasses. Anyway, as long as there were benefits, he didn't care. Only Cusin looked at Kane with suspicion. Cut off the funding. What do you plan to do? We can't stay in the North Sea forever, can we? It's too much trouble. Of course not. Kane waved his hand sharply, his voice righteous and indignant. I propose. Tonight we launch a surprise attack. We'll strike at their heart, infiltrate Germa's headquarters, and confiscate all their remaining war funds. Headquarters? Cusin poked his head out from the pile of money. Hey, are you guys serious? That's the royal palace of a member state. What if we get caught? What palace? That's a den of evil. Kane declared righteously, we're here to cleanse evil. And if I don't take it, this money will become bullets fired at civilians. Cusin, do you want to see innocent children die tragically? Cusin shrank back. Of course not. That's right. Kane snapped his fingers, pulled a red pen from his pocket, and drew a big X on the vault location on the map. Listen up, tonight's operation code name, 0 Yuan Purchase. We want to let Germa know that justice will not only be late, but it will also take their money. Chapter 26, A Terrifying Night in Germa. Kane, fellow countrymen, we've come to bring you warmth. Night. Deep and dark as ink. The moving castle complex of the Germa kingdom was deathly silent after the day's crushing defeat. The snail-shaped boats that had been smashed during the day were scattered around, and the hammering sounds of the repair work carried far into the night. The flagship castle, with the king's bedroom on the top floor. Vinsmoke Judge, wearing a bathrobe, paced restlessly back and forth in the room. The humiliation of the day was deeply etched into his heart. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Kane's smirking face and Sakazuki's devastating lava. Commander-in-Chief, it's late. Please get some rest. The emotionless voice of the clone soldier came from outside the door. Get out, Judge roared, sweeping all the documents off the table. Rest. How could he possibly sleep? 1 billion berries. That's almost half of the profits he's made from waging wars in recent years. And just like that, 4 brats robbed him of it. Kane, the Navy, Judge gritted his teeth. Just wait. Once I complete the final modification of the bloodline factor, I will show you what true fear is. He walked to the window and looked down at the heavily guarded, enormous treasure castle that connected to the flagship. There, the wealth accumulated by his Vinsmoke family over generations was stored, and it was also his greatest asset in realizing his ambitions. Fortunately, the most important things are still here. Judge looked at the treasury and felt a little more at ease. As long as we have that money and the technology blueprints, Germa can make a comeback at any time. Unbeknownst to this overlord of the North Sea, at the very moment he made his vow, 4 furtive figures, like ghosts, were silently approaching from hundreds of meters below his feet in the water. Directly below the flagship, in the icy seawater. Gurgle. 4 heads silently emerged from the water. Keep up, everyone. Hurry up. Kane, dressed in a black, tight-fitting wetsuit and wearing a diving helmet, gave incoherent instructions. Swimming at night in this weather will really make you catch a cold. Cusin exhaled a breath of cold air, ice crystals clinging to his hair, looking utterly dejected. Sakazuki's face darkened, his arms crossed. He was disgusted by this sneaky behavior, but he held back because he thought it was for the sake of justice. Hey, Tilda, Kane Tilda, are you sure this is the place? This wall looks so thick, Tilda. Borsellino tapped the huge snail shell in front of him, which was as big as a mountain wall, and made a dull sound. This is the foundation of the Germa vault castle. Of course, I scouted the location during the day. Kane pulled the sketch out of his waterproof bag. See this? According to my precise calculations, entering from this location allows us to bypass 90% of the defense system and reach the core area of the vault directly. Sakazuki, it's your turn to shine. Kane patted Sakazuki on the shoulder. Sakazuki glanced at him, and although he was annoyed, he still walked up to him. He stretched out his right hand and pressed it against the aloe shell, which was several meters thick. Netherhound. There was no earth-shattering explosion, only a soft, hissing sound. Sakazuki's arm transformed into scalding magma, and the hard alloy melted silently before him like butter, creating a circular opening large enough for one person to pass through. Well done! Kane gave a thumbs up and was the first to crawl in, followed closely by the other 3. After the 4 men took off their diving suits, they immediately looked around. It was a huge underground equipment layer with various pipes crisscrossing and steam hissing. As soon as I landed, before I could even catch my breath, I heard a series of synchronized footsteps coming from around the corner ahead. Click, click, click. A squad of clone soldiers, dressed in black combat suits, happened to be patrolling by. 6 eyes met. The air froze for a second. The clone soldier reacted extremely quickly. Almost the instant he saw the stranger, his finger was already on the trigger, and he opened his mouth to trigger the alarm. Since we've been discovered, there's nothing we can do about it. Kane spread his hands and turned to look behind him. The first rule of infiltration. As long as you kill all the witnesses, that's a perfect infiltration. Before he could finish speaking, Cusin, who had previously looked listless, suddenly sharpened his gaze. Since they were already here, exposing themselves now and triggering a ship-wide alarm would only make things worse. Ice time. A burst of cold air. It wasn't a large-scale freeze, but rather an extremely concentrated cold air mass. Before the clone soldiers could even pull the trigger, before their vocal cords could even vibrate, they were instantly transformed into crystal-clear ice sculptures. Even the monitoring den mushy above their heads, were frozen in place by the sudden extreme cold. The corridor was deathly silent. Well done. Kane walked over, flicked an ice sculpture with his finger, making a crisp sound. Now we're still in stealth mode. What kind of infiltration is this? Borsellino put his hands in his pockets, kicked away the ice shards on the ground, and muttered to himself, but his feet followed along honestly. The 4 of them moved, as if they were in an empty place. They encountered 3 more patrol teams along the way. Sakazuki didn't waste any words. He transformed his body into an element and glided along the ground. Wherever he passed, the clone soldiers were instantly vaporized by the high temperature before they could even scream, leaving not even ashes behind. A complete service for murder to cover up the crime and destroy evidence. Kane, watching this scene, couldn't help but mentally give Sakazuki 100 thumbs up. Finally, the doors to the Germa Royal Vault appeared before everyone's eyes. It stands 5 meters tall and is made of special steel. It is covered with complex combination locks, which are said to be so strong that even cannons cannot break it. Borsellino, that door over there looks pretty sturdy, Kane said, pointing to the vault door. Yay! A piece of cake. Borsellino's figure transformed into a golden light and instantly appeared in front of the gate. He extended a finger, and a dazzling light gathered at the tip, like a laser pointer, as he quickly swept it across the huge circular lock cylinder. With a soft click, the gate, strong enough to withstand artillery fire, slowly opened. What is professionalism? This is professionalism. Kane gave another thumbs up, his heart filled with emotion. These 3 future generals are practically a born criminal gang. After passing through the gate, a huge space appeared before the 4 of them. Page 28. The moment they saw the scene before them, even these well-traveled future generals couldn't help but gasp in shock. Kingsoft. Everywhere you look, there are mountains of gold. Gold coins, gold bars, gold jewelry, pure gold statues. The golden light is almost blinding. Next to the gold were neatly stacked boxes of peels, piled up into several small mountains. Further away, there are various rare minerals and jewels, as well as some high-tech blueprints and equipment sealed in special containers. Goodoo. I heard the sound of someone swallowing saliva behind me. I'm rich. Borsellino's sunglasses were almost slipped down to the tip of his nose. Hey. So much money, did Judge ransack the entire North Blue? Cusin's mouth was agape. Dirty wealth. Sakazuki's face was dark, his fists clenched so tightly they cracked, his eyes filled with rage. Every single one of these berries is stained with blood. Germa, their crimes are unforgivable. Kane whirled around, his face resolute and his voice powerful. Comrades, what is this? This is evidence of guilt. This is fuel that will allow Germa to continue waging war. With a sweeping gesture, as if a judge were announcing a verdict, he declared, I now announce that the zero-yuan purchase special operation has officially begun. The highest level of confiscation will be enforced. Move. Move everything out. Hey, Kane, do you want those gold bricks on the wall? Cusin asked, pointing to the gold bricks with reliefs on the walls of the vault. Yes. Of course, Kane's eyes lit up, and he jumped down from the pile of gold coins. Even a mosquito is still meat. We'll take it. We can't leave them a single piece. And that solid gold toilet. Take it away, too. That diamond-encrusted chandelier. Take it down. Over the next hour, a horrific looting took place at the Dermakin Cull. Cusin was in charge of packaging. He created enormous hollow ice spheres, stuffed tons of gold and silver treasures inside, and then sealed them. This not only facilitated transportation, but also made them waterproof. Boruzolino was in charge of the demolition. He transformed into a golden ray of light and darted through the vault, cutting off anything that looked valuable, whether it was embedded in the wall or welded to the ground, with a single laser beam. Sakazuki was responsible for the destruction. For large pieces of equipment that can't be taken away or contraband that you don't like, just punch them in with lava and physically destroy them. Kane was busy stuffing his system's space with the most valuable parts and high-tech blueprints, humming a little tune as he did so. Hakimi tilde Hakimi tilde Hakimi tilde O tilde na. Asiba. 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 Oh yeah, tilde naru. Na 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 tilde. Na 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 tilde. Ding. Host detected engaging in devastating plunder of member states. Nature extremely heinous. Disciplinary value plus 10000. Your actions have set back the Germa Kingdom's fiscal deficit by 30 years, severely impacting the global landscape. Bonus disruption bonus. Violation points plus 10000. Hearing the pleasant notification in his mind, Kane smiled even more happily. 20 minutes later, the once magnificent and incredibly wealthy Germa vault is now just bare concrete walls. Forget about the treasure. Even 3 layers of floor tiles were pried off by Kane's men. The space was so vast that your voice would echo, and even a mouse would have to leave with tears in its eyes. Withdraw. Kane patted the dust off his hands with satisfaction as he watched the last batch of massive ice puck cargo being pushed into the underground sewers. The 4 returned along the same route and pushed their trophies out of the bottom of Germa's warship along the seawater. On the sea, dozens of enormous ice spheres floated on the dark sea, gently swaying with the waves, containing enough wealth to buy several small countries. Back on the warship, looking at the deck full of ice pucks, Kane breathed in the golden air and felt as if he had been elevated. This is the taste of justice. He turned to look at Germa's still brightly lit fleet, a hint of mockery flashing in his eyes. Tomorrow morning, when Judge opens the vault door, his expression will be priceless. Chapter 27. Don't you have any conscience about spending this money on the celestial dragons? The next morning, the first rays of sunlight shone on the flagship castle of the Germa Kingdom. Vinsmoke Judge hadn't slept all night, his eyes bloodshot. He stood by the window, watching the snail-sized warships undergoing emergency repairs on the sea, his face grim. Commander, breakfast is ready. The clone soldier's voice rang out from outside the door right on time. I won't eat, Judge waved his hand impatiently. He's completely preoccupied with his revenge plan and has no appetite whatsoever. Oh, right, he said, as if remembering something, and ordered towards the door. Go to the vault and retrieve a batch of shape memory alloys and send them to the first laboratory. The modification plan must be accelerated immediately. Yes, Commander. The clone soldier outside the door mechanically acknowledged the order and left. Judge picked up a cup of hot coffee, a cold smile playing on his lips. Navy. Kane. You just wait. Once my perfect creation is born, I will collect this debt with interest. However, he hadn't even had a chance to swallow the coffee. Bang! The palace gates were violently flung open by a tremendous force. Instead of the cold, indifferent clone soldier who only gave work reports, the officer in charge of guarding the underground vault entered. Commander, Commander, something terrible has happened. What's the panic? Judge frowned sharply, his coffee cup trembling, scalding liquid splashing onto the back of his hand. Is the sky falling down? It's worse than the sky falling down. The officer's voice trembled. The treasure vault, the treasure vault. What happened to the treasure vault? Judge's heart skipped a beat, and an ominous premonition welled up in his heart. The treasure vault is empty. What did you say? Judge suddenly stood up, and the coffee cup in his hand fell to the ground with a crash and shattered. He grabbed the clerk by the collar, his eyes bloodshot, and roared, "Say that again." Everything is gone. Gold, peel, jewelry, rare materials, even the gold bricks on the wall are all gone. The official was in tears. Boom! Judge's mind went blank with a buzz. He staggered out of the palace, not even having time to put on his combat suit, and rushed madly toward the treasure vault. When he ran breathlessly to the gate that had been cut open by laser and saw what was inside, he felt as if his breath had stopped. Empty. In the vast treasure vault, nothing remained but a scene of utter devastation and scattered ashes. The holes left on the wall after the gold bricks were pried off seemed to be mocking him mercilessly. The entire treasure vault was so clean it looked as if it had been ravaged by a tornado. My money, my gold. Judge's legs went weak, and he knelt on the ground, his hands trembling as he rummaged through the cheap wrapping paper on the ground. My blueprints, my rare materials. He saw a line of words made of ashes in the center of the ground. Thank you, King Vinsmoke, for your generous support of the naval cause. A passing naval hero. Puff. When Judge saw these words, he felt a sweet taste in his throat and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, staining the ground in front of him red. Navy. He let out the most piercing and resentful roar of his life. Immediately afterwards, everything went black, and he fell straight backward. Commander-in-Chief. Quick! Call the medic. The Commander-in-Chief has fainted. The entire Germa kingdom was instantly thrown into chaos. Meanwhile, in the sea area, 100 miles away from Germa. Kane stood amidst the mountain of treasure, sneezed violently, then rubbed his nose, looking deeply moved. It must be Mr. Judge who has woken up. Not only did he contribute so much to the cause of justice, but he also thought of me in his busy schedule. He is such a good person. On the deck behind him, the 3 future admirals of the Navy were presenting 3 completely different states. Cusin was fast asleep, lying on a bed of gold coins, his drool soaking a gold brick. Borsellino held a diamond the size of a pigeon's egg in his hand, shining it back and forth in the sunlight, repeatedly exclaiming, "How terrifying Tilda, how dazzling Tilda." Page 29. Only Sakazuki. He sat alone in the shadows, his hat pulled low, clutching the ledger recording the amounts tightly in his hand, emanating an unsettling aura. Has the inventory been taken out? Sakazuki's voice was hoarse. These criminal funds. I've finished ordering. Kane closed the ledger in his hand. His playful smile vanished, and his expression became serious and solemn. Gold is equivalent to about 42 billion berries. Cash is 18 billion, and there are some jewelry and antiques. In total, it is about 65 billion berries. The air fell silent instantly. Even Cusin, who was sleeping, suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. How? How much? 65 billion. So much money. Sakazuki took a deep breath, lava dripping from his fist. Just how many people's blood has Germa sucked? We must report this to headquarters immediately. He stood up to get the den mushy. Wait. Kane stepped forward, blocking Sakazuki's path, and stopped the den mushy he was about to pick up with one hand. Sakazuki frowned, his eyes sharp as he looked at Kane. What are you going to do? Kane, if you dare to betray justice and embezzle this money, I will never forgive you. Foolish. Kane suddenly roared, his expression even angrier than Sakazuki's. This is ill-gotten gains. I, Kane, may seem carefree and irresponsible at times, but I am still a naval officer. How could I possibly keep it for myself? This roar stunned Sakazuki. Then why? Use your brain and think about it. Kane took a deep breath, his tone becoming sorrowful and pained. If we report the truth about this 65 billion now, where will this money ultimately go? Sakazuki paused, then said, Of course it's naval funding. Naive. So naive, Kane shook his head. Such a huge sum of money, once it's in the account, do you think the world government officials won't see it? Do you think the celestial dragons won't see it? Upon hearing these three words, the expressions of the three people present changed. Kane struck while the iron was hot. According to the amendment to the World Government Membership Law, at least 80% of this windfall income must be handed over to the Holy Land Mary Geowise as a supplement to the heavenly gold. In other words, of these 65 billion, more than 50 billion will become funds for the celestial dragons to buy slaves. They will become new necklaces around their necks. They will become bricks and tiles for them to build luxurious palaces. Sakazuki, look me in the eyes. Kane gripped Sakazuki's shoulders tightly with both hands, roaring with great emotion. The Navy is currently facing a tight budget, and many brothers in remote branches are not even able to afford meat. This money should be used where it is needed most. Improve the food for the entire Navy, upgrade the equipment of the warships, and provide compensation to the families of fallen comrades. If you make this call now, you're essentially handing over this profit of justice to those celestial dragons to squander. Is this the absolute justice you seek? Boom! These words struck Sakazuki like a bolt from the blue. He froze. As someone born in the North Blue, his deep-seated hatred for the celestial dragons was no less than his hatred for pirates. He believes in absolute justice, but in reality, the Navy often has no choice but to become the celestial dragons' bodyguards, which is the deepest thorn in his heart. The thought that this money would eventually become slave auction proceeds in the hands of the celestial dragons. Sakazuki felt worse than if he had swallowed a lump of something. Then what do you suggest we do? Sakazuki's voice was hoarse and wavering, and the anger in his eyes turned into confusion. Borsellino, standing nearby, adjusted his sunglasses and stopped fiddling with the diamond. Cusin also dropped his languid expression and looked at Kane thoughtfully. Kane's lips curled into a barely perceptible smile, but it vanished in an instant, replaced by a righteous and awe-inspiring expression. It's very simple. Kane held up one finger. We reported to headquarters that we had seized 15 billion berries. 1/6 Borsellino pushed up his sunglasses. Wow, Tilda, isn't that a bit too much, Tilda? Kane glared at him. 15 billion is enough for headquarters to give us a huge bonus, and it'll also give Marshal Kong an explanation. The remaining 50 billion. Kane took a deep breath and said solemnly, "We'll hide it and establish a Justice Reserve Fund. The four of us will jointly oversee the fund, and every penny spent requires the unanimous approval of all four of us." Kane surveyed the three men, his gaze intense. "Think about it. When the Air Marshal is unable to send troops due to insufficient military funds, we can provide them. When a comrade is discharged due to injury but cannot receive a pension, we can contribute. We can use them when we need to purchase powerful devil fruits to arm trustworthy, righteous people." "We're not embezzling," Kane said, patting the box full of cash. "We're safeguarding this spark of the future for the Navy, for justice. If one day the world government investigates—" Kane took a deep breath and straightened his back. "Just say it was me, Kane, who did it all. I coerced you. I was blinded by greed. I'll take all the blame." The sea breeze howled. The deck was deathly silent. Cusin watched Kane's retreating figure, a flicker of shock crossing his eyes beneath his eye patch. Although reason told him something was amiss, Kane's words had undeniably stirred his blood. Borsellino dropped his lewd smile and fell into a rare, serious silence. And Sakazuki. He raised his head, the confusion in his eyes dissipating, replaced by a resolute determination to find his way. "Don't joke around, Kane." Sakazuki stood up, walked to Kane's side, and placed his large, burning hand on Kane's shoulder. "Since it is the spark of justice, then we should protect it together." "I agree to withhold these 50 billion, Sakazuki said firmly. "For justice, what does it matter if I bear the blame?" "If headquarters investigates," Sakazuki raised his head, a ruthless glint in his eyes, "just say I burned it." "Oh dear," since Sakazuki said so. Cusin lay back down in the pile of money, grabbed a handful of gold coins and scattered them into the air. "Count me in anyway. I've been annoyed with those celestial dragons for a long time." "Yea, Tilda, since everyone agrees. I won't stand on ceremony. Tilda, I've had my eye on that golden teacup for a long time, Tilda." Borsellino laughed like a 300-pound child. Looking at these three future top combatants of the Navy who had completely gone into the water, Kane's lips curled into a smile. "Hugged. Once you've touched this money, you can forget about ever getting off my pirate ship." Ding. The host has corrupted three future admirals of the Navy to establish an illegal slush fund. Judgment, deceiving superiors and subordinates, forming cliques for personal gain, an extremely egregious offense. Disruptiveness, extremely high. Completely disruptive. Congratulations, host. You have gained a huge amount of disciplinary points, 10,000. Hearing the pleasant notification sound in his mind, Kane smiled broadly. "Comrades, for justice, let's divide the spoils. Oh no, let's go to the bank." Chapter 28, Sacrificing Sakazuki. A miracle happened with a single pull. Somewhere in Beihai, on an unnamed deserted island. The island wasn't even marked on nautical charts, and it was surrounded by reefs and shrouded in mist year-round. Aside from the occasional seabird that stops there, even pirates don't want to visit this godforsaken place. But today, the place is bustling with activity. "Hurry up. Move that box inside. Handle it gently, it's fragile." Kane stood on the beach, directing Cusin to use ice slides to send huge sealed boxes into the underground cavern. Sakazuki is using magma to fuse the rocks together to seal the cave entrance, and has even fired the rocks to achieve a granite-like texture, striving for perfection. Borsellino used a recording pointer to record the island's magnetic field. 5 hours later, the treasure worth over 50 billion pegaries was buried deep underground on this deserted island. As the sun set, it cast long shadows of the four people. Standing on the deck of the warship, watching the deserted island gradually recede into the distance, Kane felt as if his heart was bleeding. That's money. That's 50 billion. Although it's nominally a joint management arrangement, having so much money buried in the ground gathering dust is worse than killing him. After disposing of the stolen goods, the warship set sail again. Back to the center of the deck. More than 200 naval soldiers were lined up in neat rows, each staring longingly at the pile of boxes left behind, containing about 15 billion berries. Although they didn't know the exact amount, the heavy feel of the bag when it was being moved made everyone know it must be a huge sum of money. Page 30. Kane cleared his throat and walked to the front of the line. Ahem. Comrades, you've all worked hard on this trip to Beihai. Kane looked serious, his gaze sweeping over every face. Faced with a vicious enemy like Germa, you did not back down or show any fear, demonstrating the prowess of our elite troops. I am proud of you. The soldiers stood tall, even though they hadn't done much besides shouting 666 on the ship. They were always happy to be praised. But Kane's tone shifted, becoming serious. This mission is extremely dangerous and involves world government secrets. I don't want any details of this mission to leak out, lest it cause panic among civilians. This is for the sake of world stability. Kane waved his hand, and the boxes next to him opened with a snap. Whoosh! Bundles of peel were exposed to the air, stimulating everyone's optic nerves. There are 100 million berries here. Kane said calmly, although it's not much, it's illegal proceeds seized from Germa. According to regulations, all of this money must be turned over. The soldiers' eyes dimmed slightly, and the sound of them swallowing hard rose and fell. However, Kane suddenly raised his voice, I believe that rules are rigid, but people are flexible. Making our brothers bleed, sweat, and shed tears is not my justice. This 100 million berries should be distributed as a special allowance to all the brothers here. The entire room fell silent. 1 second later. Boom! Holy crap! 100 million. Divided among 200 of us. 500,000 each. We're rich. That's 5 years' worth of my salary. The soldiers erupted in jubilation, their eyes practically glowing red. 500,000 berries. For these low-ranking Marines, it was an absolute fortune. But once we've taken this money, I think everyone understands what to say and what not to say, right? Kane asked with a smile. How much did we seize this time? The soldiers looked at each other, then shouted in unison. Reporting, Warrant Officer Kane. We've seized 14.9 billion berries. Absolutely no more. The rest were burned to ashes by Lord Sakazuki's lava, a quick-witted sergeant shouted. Sakazuki's face twitched, but he did not refute. Very good, Kane nodded in satisfaction. Give us the money. The cheers were deafening, even scaring away the fish in the sea. Long live Warrant Officer Kane. Long live justice. What Germa? What Volt? All they know is that following Commander Kane means a life of luxury. Is this money too hot to handle? No. This is a reward for justice. Seeing the group of accomplices grinning with the money, Kane felt a little less pain in his heart. Spending 100 million to buy 200 loyal people to keep quiet was a good deal. Night falls. The warship sailed smoothly through the waves, while the soldiers were celebrating in the lower deck. the sounds of counting money rising and falling. Kane hid alone in the captain's cabin toilet, locked the door, and sat on the toilet. He feels very empty right now. The sense of loss from having just handled billions to suddenly becoming penniless made him desperately need some stimulation to fill the void in his heart. System, open the panel. A pale blue light screen unfolded on the retina. Host, Kane. Discipline value, 90,000 points. Looking at that nearly six-figure number, Kane's breathing became rapid. In addition to the original 40,000 plus, this trip to Germa brought him a huge amount of disciplinary points for extortion, vandalism, arson, setting up a slush fund, corrupting colleagues, and bribing subordinates. Almost 100,000 points. As long as you can extract just one top-tier ability, you'll have the means to completely protect yourself in this world. Kane gritted his teeth, his eyes turning crazed. System, give me a big one. Start the lottery wheel. Spend 50,000 disciplinary points. Ding. Warning, this is a high-risk, high-reward gamble. Confirm spending 50,000 disciplinary points for one roulette draw. Confirmed. Draw your prize. Your bicycle could become a motorcycle tonight. Kane felt his palms sweating. 50,000 points. How long had he saved up for that? If he pulled out some worthless item, he'd jump into the sea and kill himself. With Kane's thought, a massive roulette wheel, visible only to him, appeared on his retina. The wheel emanated an ancient and mysterious aura, and was densely covered with inscriptions of various rewards. The pointer begins to spin. Hum. The pointer flew by rapidly. Zampacuto, Ryujin Jaka. It's over. Super Saiyan bloodline slipped by. Doraemon's spare pocket, that's all in the past. Kane's heart leaped into his throat as he stared intently at the red pointer. Stop. Stop. Oh crap, don't go over there. The pointer swept across a causality skill called 100% chance of catching a blade bare-handed, and Kane broke out in a cold sweat. This thing was powerful, but too shameful. It didn't fit his noble and righteous persona. The roulette wheel is moving slower and slower. A dazzling array of prizes flashed before my eyes. Naval 6 Styles, Secret Manual. Garbage, don't want it. Top-tier observation hacky. It's somewhat useful, but not powerful enough. I maxed out my defense because I'm so afraid of pain. What kind of weird talent is this? Get lost. Thank you for your patronage. The pointer trembled as it approached the black square. No. Bro. System daddy. Stop messing with me. Kane clasped his hands together, frantically praying to the air. I'd trade all of Sakazuki's luck with women for a single big prize. It seems that some kind of mysterious sacrifice has taken effect. As if it had exhausted its last bit of strength, the pointer slowly and laboriously slid across the edge of the black grid and stopped in the center of a grid that emitted a pure cyan light. At that moment, the toilet was filled with golden light. Ding! Congratulations, host. You've been blessed with incredible luck. Obtained a Logia-type, top-tier devil fruit. Rewards being distributed. A strangely shaped fruit appeared out of nowhere in Kane's hand. It is dark blue all over, and its surface is covered with white spiral patterns. Those patterns look like flowing gas, and it feels light and airy when you hold it in your hand. Kane took a deep breath and opened the item description. The pupils dilated instantly. Chapter 29, Sengoku. You pried up all the floor tiles in Germa. Logia-type devil fruit, storm fruit. Ability description. The ultimate natural type, combining wind, thunder, rain, clouds, and air pressure the master of the sky. Characteristic 1. Elementalization. The body can transform into the storm itself. Feature 2. Weather control, not only creating wind, but also controlling thunderstorms, pressure differences, and sudden rain. Feature 3. Natural disasters occur. After awakening, it can trigger a massive hurricane, changing the island's climate. Note, after system optimization, the side effect of fear of the ocean and physical restrictions such as fear of rubber insulation has been removed. Holy crap. Kane was completely numb. A devil fruit that's immune to seawater. Is that even a devil fruit? On this vast ocean, the greatest weakness of a power user is the sea itself and seastone. Eliminating this weakness means that even if he is thrown into the deep sea, he can transform into his element and fly out. We've struck it rich. This time, we've really struck it rich. Kane's eyes lit up as he looked at the dark blue fruit in his hand. If he could only rely on physical skills to reign supreme among the younger generation before, now he truly possesses the ticket to enter the top tier of combat power in this vast ocean. More importantly, that's awesome. Just imagine, his entrance is accompanied by background music of dark clouds and thunder, and he can destroy a parking lot with a wave of his hand. This is practically tailor-made for Kane, who is committed to becoming the standard of justice in the Navy, the king of coolness. Without the slightest hesitation, Kane opened his mouth wide and took a big bite of the fruit. Page 31. Vomit. It smelled like rotten herring, stuffed into an expired sock and fermented for 3 years. Kane's face turned green, but he suppressed the urge to vomit and stuffed the rest of the fruit into his mouth in 2 or 3 bites, not even leaving the peel behind. Goo-doo. As soon as the fruit entered my stomach, the disgusting taste vanished instantly. Instead, there is an indescribable sense of lightness and etherealness. Kane felt his body disappear. He was no longer a physical entity composed of bones and flesh, but had transformed into a free wind. At this moment, he could clearly perceive every gust of air currents surging on the sea outside the cabin, hear the swirling air currents disturbed by the flapping of seagulls' wings, and even feel the joyful jumping of electrical charges in the cumulonimbus, clouds hundreds of meters above the ground. A thought crossed my mind. Kane, who was sitting on the toilet, instantly disintegrated, turning into countless streams of blue energy that rapidly traversed the cramped bathroom before finally reforming in front of the sink. He raised his hand without deliberately exerting force, yet a tiny wisp of cyan whirlwind naturally wrapped around his fingertips, spinning rapidly and emitting a soft, sizzling sound. He casually waved his hand at the air in front of him. Puff! Without a sound, the sturdy pure copper faucet was sliced smoothly in 2, as if cut by an invisible blade, the cut as smooth as a mirror. Is this the feeling of a nature-based user? Kane stared at his elementalized hand, his eyes glazed over. He could feel that, if he wanted, he could easily create a giant wave and send the warship beneath him soaring into the sky. Moreover, he felt no weakness in the face of seawater. On the contrary, he felt more comfortable with the sea's moisture. Just as Kane was immersed in the ecstasy of gaining divine power. Brew, 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 brew. The tranquility was suddenly shattered by a rapid and piercing ringtone from the den mushy on the table. This is a dedicated, encrypted line, directly connecting to naval headquarters. Kane calmed himself down, a kind smile playing on his lips, and answered the phone. Moshi, Moshi. This is the North Sea Special Operations Team of the Navy. This is Commander Kane. The signal might be weak right now. There's a storm at sea. Kane, you bunch of bastards. What exactly did you do in Beihai? The den mushy mimicked the expression of the person on the other end of the line, its originally lazy eyes suddenly widening into huge ones, its facial muscles contorting, and even the head of the den mushy was simulated with a pair of black-rimmed glasses and an afro. Do you know where Judge complained to? The five elders just personally called and berated Marshal Kong for half an hour. Wasn't it supposed to be suppression? Why did you even pry up the floor tiles of their vault? How? Have you all gone mad with poverty? Faced with the warring state's relentless barrage of attacks, Kane remained calm, moved the microphone a little further away, and innocently picked at his ear. General of the warring states period, this is slander. Utter slander. Judge was moved by the righteous light of our navy and donated the supplies voluntarily. It was his repentance for his past crimes. How could we, as righteous navy, do such a thing? Bullshit, Sengoku roared until his voice was hoarse. Judge sent photos. The entire vault is cleaner than a dog licked. What's with the hole in the wall? He also said you extorted 10 billion berries from him. 1 billion. Kane's voice instantly rose 8 octaves, filled with incredulous rage. He's lying. It's clearly 15 billion. No, I mean, there's no such thing at all. There was a brief silence on the other end of the phone. This was followed by gasps of surprise, and then Garp's signature, puehaha laughter. 15 billion, Sengoku's tone suddenly became somewhat uncertain. Is it really that much? 15 billion Pele's. Keep in mind that the Navy headquarters' total annual military budget is only so much. This kid went out and earned back a year's worth of military funds from headquarters. Reporting to the warring states, General. Kane immediately stood at attention, his tone serious. Although the process was somewhat tortuous, we did manage to recover 15 billion berries from the evil Germa. It's currently being transporting back to headquarters at full speed. Borsellino has lost weight from exhaustion, trying to protect this huge sum of money. Sakazuki has even stopped smoking his favorite cigars, guarding it day and night. We haven't touched a single penny of this money. We plan to hand it all over to headquarters for building a stronger navy. There was another 10 seconds of silence on the other end of the phone. Then Sengoku's roar rang out again, but this time, his tone was noticeably less angry and more like a helpless sigh of, "It has to be you again, kid." All right. Stop playing the victim. Get back to headquarters right now. And another thing. If Judge dares to cause trouble again, tell him that if he does, I'll send Garp to the North Sea for a vacation. Immediately. Right now. Bring the money. And justice back to Marineford for me. Yes, sir. Mission accomplished. Snapped. The phone hangs up. Kane hung up the phone, looked out at the vast sea, and his smile deepened. Go back and get scolded. It doesn't matter. This trip to the North Sea yielded profits, a share of the spoils, the recruitment of 3 future generals, and even the acquisition of a divine fruit. This is like Qin Shi Huang touching an electric shock door. He's won by a landslide. Chapter 30. The truth comes out. I am actually the god of storms. Inside the captain's cabin, Kane casually tossed the microphone back onto its pedestal, his submissive expression vanishing instantly. The general from the warring states period still has such a strong voice. Pushing open the heavy oak door, the damp, cold air unique to North Sea rushed in. Salty, fishy, cold, and the taste of freedom. Since headquarters is pressing us so urgently, let's speed things up a bit. Kane walked to the railing and snapped his fingers. The wind rises. Boom. The calm sea surface suddenly shattered. A violent gust of air formed at the stern, as if an invisible giant hand had given the warship a hard push. The immense inertia caused the entire steel behemoth to emit a sickening metallic groan. Inside the cabin, Cusin, who was catching up on sleep, flew out of the hammock and hit his head, smashing a large hole in the solid wood wall panel. "It hurts." Cusin crawled out of the wood shavings, his messy curly hair rubbing against his face. His eye mask was askew on his chin, and his face was full of mourning grumpiness. Did we collide with a colossal sea king? Or did Germa catch up? He yawned and pushed open the door, just in time to see a Marine staggering past, his face pale and his cheeks puffed out, clearly trying to suppress seasickness. "Warrant Lieutenant Cusin." "Help!" the Marine shouted incoherently. The ship is flying." "Fly." Cusin frowned, and before he could ask any further questions, he swayed again and had to hold onto the wall to steady himself. "This is abnormal acceleration." He slunk onto the deck and bumped into Borsellino, who was wearing sunglasses and had a stern expression. "Wow, that's really exaggerated." Borsellino stared at the sails overhead, which were already blown like taut drumheads, his tone less lewd and more inquisitive. "This wind, direction, and force completely violates common meteorological knowledge." In a shadowy corner, a tiny spark went out. Sakaski strode out, his dark red shirt fluttering in the strong wind. He didn't speak, his sharp, knife-like eyes fixed on the figure at the bow of the ship. Kane stood atop the dragonhead at the very front of the warship. The gale avoided him, but formed two white vortexes like wings behind him. The three exchanged a glance and walked over in tacit agreement. "Kane," Sakazuki said in a deep voice, "this abnormal speed is at your doing. Have we been discovered?" Kane slowly turned around. With his back to the raging sea, he wore his usual smile that was both refreshing and infuriating. He didn't answer directly, but slowly raised his right hand, palm facing up. "I wanted to interact with you as an ordinary person, but all I got in return was estrangement," Kane sighed, his eyes becoming deep and melancholy. "I'm not pretending anymore. I'm coming clean." Page 32. The air suddenly trembled. Visible blue energy surged and compressed wildly in his palm. The surrounding air pressure dropped instantly, giving everyone present a feeling of pressure similar to that of someone experiencing a rapid descent in an airplane. This power. Cusin's deadpan eyes widened suddenly, all sleepiness gone. "A devil fruit." "I was just in the bathroom contemplating life when I suddenly felt a bit hungry," Kane said, spouting nonsense with a straight face. "I saw a strange-looking fruit on the sink, and thinking I shouldn't waste food, I ate it." "Who would put a devil fruit in the toilet?" Cusin couldn't help but shout in disbelief. "Besides, what are the chances of that happening?" "That's fate, Cusin." Kane spoke earnestly, the cyan vortex in his hand compressed to its limit, emitting a sharp, piercing buzz.